Hi, my name's Lori Goldman, and welcome all to our evening panel on impact investing. Deep dive discussions are hosted by Things First Okanagan. We sponsor public talks, conferences, school programs, and our mission is to promote awareness of climate change and work to find solutions for a better future. By connecting with people in our community and around BC, we hope to gain insight into what we can accomplish here in the Okanagan and empower people to create good change in the world. We are so pleased to host a discussion about how our financial decisions can be a catalyst for that good change. We are living and working on the traditional and unceded lands of the Syilx Okanagan people. Land acknowledgements are meant to change how we think about where we live and remind us of the First Peoples' inherent rights on traditional lands. Learning about ways our Indigenous neighbors are working to restore native habitats, riparian areas, salmon numbers, and care for the water, Siulshwa, and joining those actions help deepen our relationship to the land and the desire to protect it. If you know the traditional territories you're on tonight, please share in the chat. And if you aren't sure, you can look up your territory on nativeland.ca. I'll put the link in the chat. So there'll be a panel discussion after the three speakers present, and please type your questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring that. So now I'd like to introduce Rick. Rick Ingram is from Peachland, and he was instrumental in coordinating this topic for us, and he'll be our facilitator tonight. Rick is a retired Peachlander who dedicates his spare time to advocating for climate change mitigation and volunteering for numerous Peachland nonprofits and committees, including the Mayor's Task Force on Climate Change. And so thanks, Rick. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Laurie. It's a real pleasure to introduce our three speakers. Hopefully our third speaker is able to make it. I'm going to give only very brief introductions to them because if I gave them proper introductions, that's all we'd have is introductions here because all three are so very accomplished. Since we're going to have a change of order, our first speaker is going to end up being Paul Rivard. Paul is a certified financial planner and chartered investment manager based in West Kelowna. He's been in asset management for 16 years with a responsible investments focus for the last 8. In his spare time, he uses it for traveling with the family and video games. Paul's going to be talking to us about different types of impact investing instruments so that you can learn about more different ways that you can different things you can invest in. Paul's going to be followed by Mike Thiessen. Mike is co-chief investment officer at Genus Capital. He's provides leadership for all the sustainable and impact investing disciplines, including research, portfolio construction, and strategy. Genus Capital is an innovator in sustainable investing and manages over $2 billion in assets for families, foundations, and institutions. And prior to joining Genus, Mike worked in equity research consulting and completed an MBA from the University of Cambridge. And Mike's going to talk about how to judge if a company belongs in your green portfolio, things that he looks for as chief investment officer and things that you can look for in your own portfolio. And hopefully we get joined as well by Joel Solomon. Joel is a founding partner of Renewal Funds, Canada's largest mission venture capital firm. Renewal invests in climate tech and organic foods in Canada and the USA, and they're recognized as an impact assets top 50 impact fund manager. Joel personally is also a 2021 Clean 50 Canada Lifetime Achievement honoree and the co-author of The Clean Money Revolution, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. And Joel's talk is going to be based on the motivation and trends towards impact investing, sort of the 40,000 foot view. So with that, I will pass it over to Paul and please illuminate us. Oh, I see Joel. Actually, Joel, since yours was the introductory talk, we'd like to have you go first if you can. You just missed the wonderful glowing introduction I gave for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. Lori, have you made Joel a co-host as well?
I think Joel said he wasn't going to be screen sharing. Do you have anything to present, Joel?
I do not have any presentation.
Oh,
Just you.
then take it away and we'll just listen to you.
How much time do I have?
Lori, was about 8 minutes or so.
Yes, about
Perfect.
that.
Perfect. Okay, and we're going to talk about impact investing and why it is so important. I grew up in the 60s, and that caused me to raise a lot of questions and think about a lot of questions about society and about capitalism. And my father was a very successful capitalist, and I saw lots of the wonderful benefits. And my mother became an artistic photographer who in her 90s, her career is really blossoming right now. Her name is Rosalind Fox Solomon, if you're interested in seeing what that's all about. But she also had a big influence on me. And it was a turbulent time in the 60s, and there were a lot of questions about capitalism and Vietnam War, and all kinds of things were going on in society. And I was infected with the idea that we could do things better, and that the economy and business and finance were an opportunity to take care of our families and gather some affluence, but also a time to take global and local and all kinds of issues more seriously. And when I contemplated both my own career and then what my feelings were about the opportunities that existed to invest money, I started to have a lot of challenges about what could I invest in that would do less harm and potentially even better, do good in the world. And that led to a career of trying to support businesses that were contributing to positive outcomes in society. I was particularly influenced by environmental issues, but also by social justice issues, and just seeing the many unfairnesses in the global economic system and local economic systems. And I became determined to find where that seed was of change making through money and finance. And I got lucky to find gatherings and networks of people that were thinking about the same topics, looking at how my health was affected by the food that I eat, how the food that I eat was affected by how farming was done, how chemicals and pesticides and things that made farming more profitable, the effect that they were having on people that worked on the farms, on the soil, on the other creatures that are part of the system that keeps us all healthy. And I became determined to find, which I did, some of the early parts of the movement to have us think about what's behind the products that we get off the shelf, the stocks and bonds we might invest in, just looking at their return rate. And I became fanatically early on committed to reading the labels, so to speak, looking at what kinds of investments I might have for my savings accounts, for how to try to begin building some wealth so that I might someday buy a house, and all of the things that we dream of. And eventually, I realized that there was a new opportunity that was growing, that was aligning individual and personal values with money, what I purchased, what I invested in, and how I used my money. through my lifetime. So that led to a career. Today, I manage a venture capital fund. We call it a social venture capital fund. Also might be known as impact investing. And we find companies in Canada and the US that are doing something positive for the health of our bodies, the health of our households, the health of the oceans, the air, the soil, and all the things that are going to be necessary so that future generations can look back and see that we who are alive today and influencing the future of the economy have choices to make. And those choices now include many great opportunities to continue building wealth, to support the things that we really believe in. And this is a field and a choice that is growing and becoming more creative every day. And I've been very privileged to be part of a venture capital fund that invests in organic food, non-toxic households, and climate technologies and other environmental technologies. And I have a feeling that I'm close to my 8 minutes, and I want to complete this introduction by encouraging all of us to continue reading the labels, so to speak, and thinking about who's at the other end of the products and services that we benefit from. What's the condition of the workers? What's the condition for the environment? How are we taking care of the preciousness of soil and the air and water that we drink? This is now a large industry. There are many products. There are lots of screenings and ways that wealth managers can help us make the choices that we believe in. And this is an opportunity that is inspiring next generations. And we are going to see the face of the economy steadily change over the coming decades. And I'm proud to be part of that.
Well, thank you very much, Joel, for that high-level view and sort of a history of the evolution of impact investing. Pass the baton over to you, Paul.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Let's load this one up. And I don't think it's fair that I'm standing between two incredible speakers. So I'll do my part to just run through here and hopefully have something meaningful to add as well. Yeah, so I'm Paul Rivard. I'm VP Sales for NEI Investments, which is a responsible investment firm. Yeah, so let's get into it. I have about 27 slides in about 8 minutes, so we'll see how quick I can fire through those ones there. Just really quick of who we are. So NEI Investments is owned by, or is part of Aviso Wealth, and we are owned by the credit unions. So if you're a credit union member on this call today, I work for you, and very, very proud to be very much entrenched in the credit union space for sure. So yeah, we're got 100 billion combined assets. I think our AUM is just over 10 billion now, just in funds. And we believe we're a leader in responsible investment, not just within Canada, but worldwide as well. And now, Rick, I'll pick on you here. My slide is not showing all the little pieces that are on here. Are you just seeing a pyramid there?
Yeah, I'm just seeing a pyramid with a zigzag.
All right, let's do some quick little adjustments on here. Bear with me 2 seconds. Let's see. All right, we're gonna go behind the scenes and see what we have here. Hopefully this is the way everything is on screen now.
Yes, all the words are there too.
Perfect, okay. So what I wanted to do with the 10 minutes is basically kind of give an explanation on responsible investments and how it's not just one thing, how there's several different areas part of it. So responsible investment is a spectrum and it's multidimensional. And so when you're thinking about how are you investing your money, there's a lot of different ways of going about it. And so greenwashing is not what we want to say, but maybe there's a way of knowing more and more about how we view responsible investment from the lowest commitment to what we believe is the highest commitment going forward. So the lowest commitment is just consideration. So you'll hear a lot about ESG, which means environmental, social, and corporate governance. And there's a lot of funds and asset managers out there that say, yes, we consider ESG. It's not a huge factor, but they'll think about the environmental, social, or corporate governance impact on the companies that they're looking to invest in. And that consideration may or may not lead to a decision of it being within the portfolio, but at least it's being considered. And so lowest commitment there. The next level of commitment is often what I hear when I talk to investors about responsible investment, which is the screening, the negative screens. So at our company, we rule out weapons, tobacco, gambling, pornography, and nuclear power. And those are the main ones that we found engaging with companies. We can't really change them. I can't make a tobacco company not sell tobacco. We can't make a adult entertainment. Well, we'll go from there. So it's very much a kind of a hard screen. And we like that because we can align the values of the companies we hold with what's in the portfolio. The question here, though, that it might be a little bit controversial, but can we make meaningful change by just screening out all companies? And I know fossil fuel free is a big part of the change going forward, and I'm happy that that's part of how I invest. But the next level, or at the top there, you see engagement. Negative screens make us feel better, but they don't necessarily change all companies. And so we think that screens is a part of it, but only one way of investing responsibly as well. The next level up, it would be integration, where the environmental, social, and corporate governance scores are almost just as important as price earnings ratio. And I'm sure Mike, who's following me, has a much better explanation on the different factors and how those are integrated. So hopefully not putting you on the spot, but I always look forward to a CIO doing the explanation instead of someone like myself. And why we like integration, in a sense, and I'll pick on the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. So one of the largest wealth funds use a lot of of Norway's oil money to diversify and protect generations in Norway going forward. One of the big announcements they came out with in 2020 is that they're not going to invest in 5 Canadian oil companies because their greenhouse gas emissions were just too much. And that's part of their criteria. You have to be at a certain threshold. So it didn't mean they're ruling out all energy companies or all oil companies, but the ones that are the big polluters. And so integration is important because some of those other energy companies, in Calgary, including some that would have been banned, Suncor, they kind of want some of that sweet capital to be invested from these big companies. So they all of a sudden start to perk up and say, wait, I don't want my competition down the street to get access to this capital. We want some. What are some things we could be doing to make us eligible again to get invested there? And so whether or not it's for the right reasons, that integration and using ESG as part of the decision-making helps companies start thinking about what are ways they can act better going forward. So integration, we feel, is a really important way of picking. And the one that I believe is absolutely more relevant tonight is the thematic and impact. So are we investing in a specific area that would lead to specific impacts? And I'll go through a list of those momentarily. And then the two biggest pieces, or the two highest commitments to responsible investment, at least in our view, is engagement. So where we sit down with the company with dialogue and help highlight kind of risks and opportunities that they might have by starting to consider more of their environmental, their social, and their corporate governance impact there as well. I'll have one or two stories to share on that side. And then the flip side of that coin is advocacy. So let's not just focus on the companies, let's work with the governments and the industry regulators to start affecting policy. So the companies need to play in the sandbox, and we want to teach them to be better within there. But at the same time, if we can work with the regulators that define the sandbox, we can push a lot forward there too. So selfless promotion, Our company is A+ rated for engagement by the UN's Principles for Responsible Investment. So we're very proud of the work we do in regards to engagement. All right, so moving along quick, we're on slide 4 now, which is great. I think impact investment, and Joel probably nailed it great when he was bringing this up. So we feel going forward that the 21st century global economy is going to need a fundamental transformation of existing infrastructure. So we're going to be moving to a future that is smarter, just based on how our homes operate, cleaner, based on our transition off fossil fuels, and definitely more resilient going forward. So from a investment perspective, governments are going to be spending trillions of dollars going to making this switch. We believe that impact bonds and impact equities are the way of just going about and taking advantage of that. So for example, we think there's going to be about 10 trillion in impact bonds over the next 10 years or so. We know that global impact equities, or companies that make a measurable impact, that's growing and growing really, really fast. So to be in this space and to be interested in it is both good for the planet, but it's also good for finding opportunity out there as well. So I guess the big question in top of mind is, what is impact investing? And so to us, we focused it in these three sides. So first, the investment needs to have an intention to actually generate a positive or social or environmental impact. And if you don't have that intention, there's no start to it. The second thing is that you actually have to be able to measure these impacts as well. They got to be measurable and actually measured so that we can report them, because you can have the good intention, but if we can't show what we're doing, it's really not fair to call that an impact investment. And then the final piece, of course, because we need to retire, is there actually has to be a financial return on there. So the difference between philanthropic endeavors versus strictly traditional investment, usually impact investing is the balance in between. And so more often than not, we think about the environment, we think about green bonds, we think about renewable energy as the big area for impact. But we also like to think of a few other options as well out there too. So we've narrowed our focus to 3 categories: so life essentials, human empowerment, and the environment. So life essentials is, where can we put our money that can lead to more affordable housing, that can lead to clean water and sanitation in communities that don't have that, better health and access to health services, and sustainable agriculture and nutrition. What are those that we could fund that we can measure we're making a meaningful impact there? The second place to look at would be human empowerment. And I think the digital divide is huge and a big important piece there. I know during COVID, my kids had to get schools from home, teachers online. One of the most tragic photos I saw at the beginning of that were 2 kids sitting on their laptop on a sidewalk outside of a Burger King because they didn't have access to the internet at home. And so in order for them to learn during COVID, they had to use Wi-Fi from a fast food restaurant. And so what are different ways we can go about making an impact that can help improve the lives going forward? Because if you get the access, you then get the education and job training that can lead to financial inclusion in that hierarchy of needs. After we got the finances locked down, we can then start thinking about our own safety and security. And then we can be thinking about bigger things such as that you see there, gender equality, women's empowerment from that standpoint. And then environmental, I think we're most familiar with. So alternative energy sources, energy efficiency, waste management, pollution control as well too. So these are the areas that we're thinking about going forward. So really quick examples. One that you might not think of. So one of the holdings that we like and we think makes an impact is a drone company. One that's basically, it's a manufacturer of GPS sensors and communications equipment. They got technologies so that when you're growing a farm, you can be very, you don't just have to blanket it with fertilizer. You can be very focused into where you're going to be applying that in water as well. So that leads to a reduction in the overuse of fertilizer and helps reduce the amount of water being used if you can be very tactical with that. And then the second piece before I know we're only on slide 10 to 34, but I'll hand it back to Rick, is again, just even working with the German company as well, that just makes things more energy efficient on that side. So if we can invest in companies that are making it easier to reduce fossil fuel consumption in urban areas and with companies, we think that's a meaningful impact going forward there as well. And so with that, at 7:31, Rick, I think I probably went over, but man, I could talk about this stuff for days. Love this stuff.
Yeah, we could easily have a 3-hour webinar.
Yes,
and still just scratch the surface of the topic.
absolutely.
But thanks a lot. So Mike, pass it over to you. And
great, thanks, Rick. And thanks, first things first. Excited to talk here today. I'm just gonna find my presentation here. Okay, I hope you can see this. Yeah, so today I'm excited to talk about aligning your investments with your values. As Rick said, I could talk about what to look for in a sustainable, or what to look for in an impact portfolio, and how to really check if your portfolio is aligned with your values. I saw a question in the chat about that as well, so we'll definitely cover that. So first off, there we go. First off, I just want to talk about creating a values action plan. So how do you go from having just a normal investment portfolio and moving it towards a really values aligned portfolio that you're probably quite excited about, that you're making the impact that you really care about? So there are a few different steps, and then I'll talk about some impact measurement techniques after this. But first, you need to be clear on your core values. We need to identify our top concerns, and I'll go into more detail into these. Then we need to answer our big financial questions. And then we need to work with a portfolio manager to put together an action plan. So first of all, getting clear on your values. So everybody has things that they're passionate about, ways that they really want to be impacting the world. Some people have these, written down and they're really driving towards it. Other people, it's just kind of in what they do. So you might need to be thinking more about what your values are, get those really clear. There are numerous ways to do this. We often walk through a list of different kind of core areas that people might want to be focusing on. So we might look over the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So these are 17 goals, which I'll actually bring up later. But they're goals which range from things like healthcare and education and climate action. And from there, you can really choose what you are really passionate about and where you want to make a difference. There are other ways to do it too. There's actually card games that I've seen that help you to figure out the values that are most important to you. And there's a huge diversity of values. So everybody could have different values, different things that they're really passionate about. Once you figure out your values, then you want to identify your top concerns. So it's really just narrowing down these values and finding maybe the 3 to 5 different areas that you really want to focus on. Because then once you have those, you can reorient your portfolio to really focus on those core areas. And these are values that you can use when you're thinking of your philanthropy as well, or when you're using your time to make an impact. You can focus on these values as well. So I think it's a good exercise, even if you're not doing this for investment reasons. I think it's still a good way to go about it. And then this is the area that most financial advisors focus all of their time on, is looking at financial expectations. So what's a client's financial need? When do they need their cash flow? What kind of income do they need? What is their risk profile? And creating a investment policy statement around all of these financial needs. So that's definitely a core component of creating your values action plan. But for us, we think that it's important to look at this, but then also look at your values as well. And then you want to be working with a portfolio manager to put together an action plan. So a portfolio manager can look at your values, they can look at your financial needs, and then they can figure out what is possible given those needs, given your constraints that you might have. And you can combine these different areas. So in the green here, we have your values. And then in the blue, we have your financial expectations and your financial needs. And then in the pinky purple kind of circle, we have basically what is possible. So understanding how your portfolio can have a positive impact on society, and really also understanding how it possibly can't have an impact on the areas that you want to focus on. There are certainly areas that it's really hard to make an impact in through your investments, and maybe it's better to make an impact in that area through your time, maybe through volunteering or through your job, or maybe through philanthropy. And portfolio managers can help you figure out which of your core passions, which of your values you can really make come to life through your investments. So you can create a customized investment solution through looking at these three areas. And then once you've created your portfolio and you're starting to get some returns, you not only want to be focusing on measuring your financial returns, so measuring your overall financial performance, possibly measuring your performance relative to a benchmark, but you also want to be measuring the impact that you're making as well. And you want to check and make sure, is my portfolio actually aligned with my values? Is there something kind of out of place here? So within our quarterly statements at Genus, we not only show people their financial returns, but we show people various other metrics that might help them know if their portfolio is aligned with their values and making the impact that they're wanting to make. So a few of the core sustainable metrics that we look at and that all clients get in their quarterly statements is fossil fuel reserves, carbon intensity, and ESG ratings. So you might have values or impact that you're wanting to make that is different from these. These are more sustainability, kind of climate action type sustainable metrics that we focus on, but a lot of our clients do want to focus more on climate action. So these are very popular ones, but we really can help clients with measuring their portfolio on other parameters as well. But these ones, such as fossil fuel reserves, you can see that our fossil-free funds, which are sustainable funds, have 0 fossil fuel reserves. We don't have any in those funds, and the benchmarks, so the TSX or MSCI World, have very significant fossil fuel reserves. Carbon intensity, which is your overall carbon emissions relative to the size of the companies that you're investing in. So it's basically, so it would be tons of carbon emissions per US dollars in million in US dollar sales. And so our fossil-free funds are quite low relative to their benchmarks as well. And then we also have ESG ratings. So as Paul mentioned, ESG is environmental, social, and governance. And so we can get ESG ratings from a variety of different data providers. And you want to have your ESG ratings higher than the benchmark. And you can really customize this based on what's important to you. So maybe you just want to look at the environmental score. Maybe you just want to look at a social score. Maybe it's just governance that's most important to you. There's also other areas that you could look at too. Some clients are more focused on things like biodiversity. Some clients might be more focused on kind of women in leadership within the companies that they're investing in. So you can really customize how you want to measure your portfolio and whether how you want to measure whether your portfolio is aligned with your values. So then beyond these sustainability metrics, we also measure the impact that a portfolio is making for clients. And we measure impact by looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So these are 17 goals that I mentioned before that can be used to try and figure out your values, figure out what you're really passionate about. And so when we're measuring an impact of a portfolio or of a company, we're looking at what percentage of revenue is a company making from a product or service that's contributing towards one of these sustainable development goals. So you might have a company like Vestas Wind Systems, who designs wind turbines. They're out of Denmark. 100% of their revenue is coming from affordable and clean energy type areas. So that's sustainable development goal number 7. You might have other companies where maybe 20% of their revenue is coming from a high impact area. So maybe it's a technology company that has an energy efficiency project. So maybe 20% of their revenue is coming from climate action type activities. And then for our portfolios, we can get an average of all of the impact revenues from companies within the funds. And then we get an overall impact rating in terms of positive impact. We also measure negative impact. So we do that kind of in reverse as positive impact. So we look at what percentage of revenue is coming from products or services that are taking away from a sustainable development goal. So you could have a company that has 100% negative impact revenue. So this could be a tobacco company possibly. So they could be, maybe they're getting 100% of their revenue from tobacco, which is hurting the good health and well-being sustainable development goal, number 3. And then we also combine the positive impact and the negative impact to get an overall net impact score. And so I can show you an example from one of our funds here. So this is our fossil-free high impact equity fund. So this fund, we're really trying to maximize the amount of impact that we're making in public equities, while also meeting financial goals. So within this fund, the average company is making about 52% of its revenue from high impact activities that are contributing towards a sustainable development goal. And you can see that there's no negative impact there. That's because we're making sure that we're not investing in any companies that are negatively impacting sustainable development goals. And then so its overall net impact, which is the positive minus the negative, is also about 52%. And then if you compare it to its benchmark, which is the MSCI World Index, so it's a global index, we use this index to compare its financial performance, but then also its impact performance. So its positive impact for the benchmark is about 12%, negative impact is about 9%, and then so the net impact is about 3%. So you can see that the overall positive impact and the overall net impact is much higher for this high impact equity fund versus its benchmark. So this is another way that you can measure, is my portfolio aligned with my values? Is it doing better than the average, stock in the developed markets, or possibly the average stock within Canada? So I think it's really important to look at those sustainability metrics. You can look at the sustainability metrics for individual companies. You can ask an advisor or portfolio manager to bring that up for you. And you can also look at the overall impact that is coming from your portfolio. And so just as a quick recap, so creating your action plan, first you want to be figuring out what your values are and really aligning your investments with your values. You also want to be looking at your financial needs. And then you want to be looking at what can actually be possible within my portfolio. Given my financial needs, given my values, what can we actually do? And that's when you can create a customized investment solution that can be aligned with your values and can make the impact that you wanted to make. So that's all for me. Thanks for allowing me to talk, and I'm excited for some questions.
Thanks a lot, Mike. As people come up with their questions and put them in the chat, I'm going to start with something a little bit different, because I'm guessing it's probably a rare chance that the three of you are together with each other on a stage. And I'm betting that you each have an interesting question you'd like to ask the others. So I'm going to give you the opportunities to ask a first question, and we'll go the same order as the talk. So Joel, what question would you like to ask of Paul and or Mike? You're on mute.
I would love to hear from both Paul and Mike what the trend line is in demand for these products. Are there customers asking for it?
I mean, I'll handle it from our side. Last year was a great year in the industry, period. But the fact that, goals set by our boss, we blew them out of the water by over 250%, and they were pretty stretch goals anyway. So a good pat in the back, but it's now now more important that people are finally realizing that you don't have to sacrifice returns to align with your values. And people are realizing that companies need to get on board as well too and go that way. So sustainability is, when you invest in a company, you want it to be around 20 years from now. So from that standpoint, I mean, I guess the answer is yes. I don't think 5 years ago we'd be able to, well, one, be on a Zoom call anyway, but to try to get 70 people interested in a conversation in an evening like this would have been impossible. I think Genus and NEI, or my former Ocean Rock, were at the Responsible Investment Association conference like 6 years ago. And it was a bunch of advisors and us going like, this is important, right? Yeah, of course this is important. And now when you go to the actual conference, it's full of investors and people wanting to get more info. So that's a long-winded answer, but I don't know. Mike, you're probably more, you're better spoken than I am. So maybe you have a better answer for him.
No, I completely agree. So at Genus, it's the fastest growing part of our business. The fossil-free and sustainable funds are growing quite quickly. And then the impact fund is growing exponentially. I think when I started with Genus about 5 years ago, I think the impact fund was probably about 5 times smaller than it is now. So it's grown 5 times is what I'm trying to say. And so there's just been huge growth, which is exciting. And we're seeing new products coming out all the time. We're always trying to create new products as well in the impact side. And there's more and more, venture capital funds, private equity funds coming out too. So it's exciting.
Great, thanks. Paul, your turn. What would you like to ask of your 2 associates?
I mean, I'm curious on their 2 takes on greenwashing, right? Like that's the biggest thing, is that there's a whole bunch of players coming on here because they say, oh, if I slap an ESG sticker on a fund, that means I'm clean, right? Or oil companies issuing green bonds because they might use that money maybe to transition. And so anyway, I'm on here. So thoughts on greenwashing and risk to the reputation of what we do.
I could start. Yeah, we're seeing greenwashing all the time. I think especially after 2021 was a really good year performance-wise for sustainable funds. So I think since then, a lot of large banks and other asset managers have tried to jump on the bandwagon and like you said, slap on a green label. But if you look deeper into some of these funds, you'll see some names that you wouldn't expect in a green fund because it's simply the same fund as they had before, except with a green label on it. You can see that with a lot of ETFs as well. So that's disappointing because a lot of people are getting into sustainable investing for the first time. They're really excited about it. And then it's just creating disillusionment, I guess, among some people. So I think one of the best ways to avoid investing in a fund that is greenwashing is simply to just look at the holdings and think, okay, if this is a green fund, if this is aligned with my values, then would this company be in there or not? And so that's a more manual way to do it. Another way to do it is to look at some sustainable metrics, some of them that I mentioned before, such as carbon intensity of a fund. If the carbon intensity is similar to the benchmark or higher than the benchmark, then that's probably not too green. You want to have something that's quite a bit lower. There's other metrics that you can look at too, but that's probably kind of the quickest one that you can look at and determine whether it's a greenwash fund or if it's actually a sustainable fund.
No, I'm here. Okay. Well, my view of this, we're in a different kind of wealth management in that we assemble partners who put their money in to do a more venture capital type investing rather than focusing on the public markets. And so that's not for everyone, but for people who are comfortably financially, that opportunity is growing, and there are products of all kinds that focus on the issues that you may care about most. So we're seeing a rapid growth of new managers in this field that may be women, they may be people of color. There's an indigenous-led fund that focuses on indigenous entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of creativity coming out of the higher risk fund type product, or I should say venture capital type product. But what's going on is that the consumer, we all, are becoming more aware about how things are happening in the world, and the issues that we can see that we may feel are causing harm, and we don't really want to support that or have that be part of our roadmap and DNA. And so all kinds of new products are coming up that can provide very nuanced options about exactly what type of values and purpose that matters most to you. The screening movement and the ESG movement is providing tremendous value to this advance, because now that you can go and have a diversified portfolio with your portfolio manager, your wealth management firm, if they're on the ball and taking you seriously, then what you say and ask for as a client actually matters. We're moving past the era where the wealth manager kind of maybe pats you on the head and says, we'll take care of it all, and don't worry about it. You're going to be really pleased with your financial results. Well, the ESG managers are performing very well also and getting better. And even some of the most traditional type firms are developing ESG practices because the consumer, us, are insisting upon it. And if our children are paying attention and we're sharing what we're doing with them, then that momentum is building even faster, because younger generations are well informed and concerned, even often frightened about what the future is going to hold if we carry on with an economy that doesn't pay attention to people and planet and the places where we have to live. So as we get better informed and see how the world is working, many of us get less comfortable and shop around for those who will really pay attention and respect those wishes. And the so-called science of it is getting better and better. And both my colleagues here are deep in those fields. And what's happened in just the last decade of the emergence of prioritization, of aligning where my money is with what I actually care about and believe in, and that when I go to sleep at night, I can know that my dollars are actually causing more good in the world and less harm. That matters a lot to me, and it's mattering to more and more people.
Thanks. Excellent. Your turn, Mike, and then we're going to go to some of the great questions we have in the chat.
Great. Well, a question that we get quite often, and I'd love to hear both of your answers to this, is around impact and performance. So a lot of people, want to make an impact, but they also want to save for retirement, or they want to save for whatever it might be. So what do you say to clients or potential clients that are wondering if they need to be giving up performance in order to make impact?
This is an easy answer. Like, no, you don't. And I mean, I have about 35 slides. As you know, I'm a slide guy that can go in and justify every little piece. But especially in fixed income, I think. And again, I don't like talking to a chief investment officer about fixed income because I'm, it's like David and Goliath on that side. But the benefit that we've seen with impact bonds even is that people aren't just holding them for that interest rate coupon that's being clipped. They're holding them because they know it makes an impact. So yes, they're going to be fluctuating with how interest rates affect the bond market, but they're a little bit stickier. People aren't so quick to sell and dump them because they know they're making an impact. So the fact that you get a good return, people are holding on to them in that secondary market is great. And again, I don't know. So I'll stop ranting now, but yes, the fundamentals, everything aligns where impact definitely seems to, you're not sacrificing return. And in fact, we've seen outperformance, but we don't want to say they're going to outperform. We're just going to say you don't have to sacrifice return.
For the business that I'm in with Renewal Funds Company, we have an easier and a harder challenge. The businesses we get involved in tend to be early stage, and they're not as far developed as the stock market, the people on the publicly traded markets are. But the beautiful thing about it is that our job is to find the innovators and the entrepreneurs who have passion about an important issue in the world. Could be agriculture, could be how my household safe to breathe the air? What's the future world going to be for my kids? Who's at the other end of the product and services that come from around the planet and just show up on the grocery shelf or in the hardware store, things like that? And we have more access to information. There's more transparency. There are more people tracking and analyzing and assessing what's our carbon impact, what's our impact on the lives of the farmers or of the people that are working in the manufacturing plants. How am I connected to what's going on in the Ukraine right now through my investing? Am I? Aren't I? And so we're becoming more sophisticated as a society and as people that are seeking to have our money managed well beyond only the financial return. And the beautiful thing is that so many of the so-called ESG or impact companies or businesses whose purpose has really been designed around cleaning up some part of the economy, whether it's agriculture, construction, fuel, housing, all the different issues that we have to address. And there's a lot of economic opportunity. And why not at least take part of our money and be part of the excitement and the global evolution where we're actually able to gather the information to have more transparency and to understand the effect of things and what they leave behind and what's the waste product and what ends up in the rivers and what ends up in our drinking water and in the air we breathe and et cetera. So if you can make the choice to ignore all that and just look at the bottom line. But again, the great news is the bottom lines are becoming competitive now because there's a great awakening of understanding that I'd rather have reusable than plastic. I'd rather have more fuel efficient cars. I wish when I get on an airplane, they'll get that figured out and there'll be more efficient jet fuel and things like this. And it enables us all to be active citizens participating in influencing what the future is going to be like. I find that very exciting.
Great, thanks a lot. We've got a couple of really good questions here in the chat. I'm going to jump to one here from Margaret. We're with a typical big bank with a mix of mutual funds, RIF, and TFSA. Where do we start to work towards impact investing? Do we need to leave our bank? I'll let you start with that one, Paul.
Typically, no. I mean, depends on if it's if it's a financial advisor in the branch, they only have access to their internal funds, then maybe you would need to go out. Because none of us here are licensed, is my understanding. I highly recommend going to the Responsible Investment Association Canada website. They'll have a list of advisors who either have the responsible investment specialist designation or who are members there. And that can connect you with an advisor who has a deeper understanding of responsible investment in general. So hopefully that's a fair way of answering that question.
One thing that was really important to me in my own evolution as an investor was to understand that the people that are sitting across the desk and giving me their advice about how they'll use my money, they also have opinions, and they have belief systems about how investing should be done. And we can often be intimidated and feel insecure about actually asking questions and asking harder questions. But you want to find advisors today who know that it's important to listen to the customer and really listen closely to what matters, because all the tools are now available to do the screening and to make good selections. So just remember that you are in charge of your money, and ask for what it is you care about.
Anything to add there, Mike?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to figuring out your values, and then talking about your values to your financial advisor, whether that's at a bank or at an asset manager, and seeing if they have a product or some sort of portfolio that can be aligned with those values, and figure out how they're going to measure in the future if they're actually hitting those values or not. And you'll find out quite quickly if they know their way around sustainable investing, and if they have ways that they can invest aligned with your values. A lot of banks, as we mentioned before, do have some new products out that are focused on sustainable investing, and so I'm sure there are advisors there that are wanting to really help you invest with your values, but it might be more difficult. I'm not really sure. So I think that it is possible, but first you need to go in knowing what you value and just really stick to your guns there.
Well, actually, that answer is an excellent segue into a question that's, I think, directed towards you. In your talk, you mentioned finding your values, and you said, what is the name of the card game that helps you find your values?
The card game that I saw recently, I think, was made by Carol Newell. Joel, maybe you know more about that card game than I do. I think there's probably another one too.
There are growing numbers of them, but Carol Newell, who I worked with for a number of years and remain an advisor and partner with, was really a pioneer in helping move along these concepts, because she was so determined that she had to understand what her money was actually doing, that she insisted upon it. And she was an early client of Genus Capital, and I think probably helped encourage them to take seriously the ESG world. And so Carol created a kind of a deck of cards for people to use to look at questions about your values and about what actually matters and what you're willing to do or not do about that. And this is a tool. There are others out there as well, but a basically self-guiding tool to examine questions that will help you be clear when you go in and talk to your wealth manager.
It looks like Mary Lou just put in the chat, Reweaving Wealth is the name of the card game.
There you go. Averill had a good question here. A lot of climate action groups are challenging banks in particular to divest from oil and gas companies. Are these actions likely to have a significant effect such that investments are then going to swing to impact ESG instead? Who wants to field that one first? Joel, looks.
I'd be happy to. Consumers have an impact, and consumers that have money to be managed have a special impact. And climate, environmental issues, and are we going to leave a world that is livable for future generations is less and less theoretical. And more people having access to more information and seeing what's happening globally. We just have so much access now to information. And this is stimulating a very different relationship between the client and the manager than used to be the case, in which there was just one single question, which is, how do I maximize my financial return regardless of cigarettes, alcohol, nuclear weapons, whatever the issue? I don't want to think about that. I just want more money. But there is a growing awareness that information, access to information, understanding more and more about what the human influence is on the rest of the planet, and access to seeing global affairs and et cetera. And so we are more awakened to these kinds of questions. Not everyone, but the numbers are growing rapidly.
Anybody else want to add something there?
I think regarding banks, within our funds, we do have some banks, Canadian banks, in some of our sustainable funds, but we don't have them in our high impact funds because we don't see them as significantly contributing to UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's how we're measuring the impact that we're making. But in our sustainable funds, we do have them because we do believe in engagement. I think as Paul was talking about before, engagement is extremely important in sustainable investing, and banks are in an industry where they can finance, the oil sands, or they can finance a clean tech project. They can do one or the other. They don't have to solely rely on the oil sands. So we think, and we have been able to change what they're doing through engagement over the years. So one of our big engagements in the past few years has been asking for more transparency, because with a lot of these banks, it's hard to really know what they do because they're not advertising it to everyone, all the investments that they make, and they have to be confidential about certain investments. But we do want more transparency, because not only is it a values-based reason for wanting transparency, but it's also a risk-based reason. We see investing in oil and gas as more risky than investing for the future. So if we see there's risk in oil and gas, then we want to know how much risk these banks are taking on. Is it 20% of their overall loan portfolio, or is it 10% or 2%? We really want to know so that we can judge our overall risk.
Yeah, and I'll even add reputation risk to the banks as well too. So, I mean, nothing is worse than a bank champion that they're, hey, look at our amazing environmental score, and then of course they're responsible for funding most of carbon emissions in Canada as well too. So it's that secondary metric, not necessarily just the first piece, that you really want to look into when analyzing companies.
Okay, great, thanks. Here's an interesting one about where to find information about how responsible a company is from Lee's. Is there information online as a website that can be trusted in categorizing different companies according to their impacts, social and environment? Is there an organization that gives ratings for these companies? or does a person have to do their own digging?
I will say, and again, Mike, you probably have a really good take on this. There's several different ratings agencies that can go out and give a sustainability score and ESG score. The problem that we see is that they're viewed through their own lens. So one, Tesla might be viewed as an amazing, responsible firm because they're electric vehicles and away you go. The opposite side is they're very anti-union. Their safety records, in some cases, not great. Where are they sourcing their materials for this? So it's two very different views, but one could say it's a great company and one can't. So I find it hard, especially for the retail investor who's just, you've got Google and you've got this just ocean of information to try to get really in-depth info. But yeah, so there's Sustainalytics and MSCI, and so what we do is we try to take all those data sources and then come up with our own decision about what we think is appropriate on there. That's tough.
Yeah, I agree with that approach. We do something similar. We have multiple data providers, and we put their data into models and then try and make our own decisions based on their data and based on how our models interpret their data. But for a retail investor, it's the price tag for data is out of most people's reach. The data companies are making a lot of money off ESG and sustainability data. In terms of kind of free sources, I know that I think a lot of financial websites will have, at least some sort of ESG rating. I know Yahoo Finance, Google Finance, they do have some ESG ratings. I don't remember what provider gives those and how reliable they are actually. But if you do have individual companies or funds that you want checked out, definitely reach out to Paul or I, and we can help you with that.
Anything to add on that one, Joel? If not, I'll try and squeeze one more in before we have to kind of wrap it up here.
Go ahead.
Okay, one last question, because a lot of folks in the Valley are retirees, and so many people are collecting pensions, not just CPP. Is there a way of finding out how a pension provider is investing? And I'll add something onto the question is saying, is there any way of influencing your pension provider?
There's a chance they'll have a responsible investment policy baked in there, is possible. And so, I mean, this is kind of tying it around to, to back to greenwashing as well. If you're looking at the investments you hold, go to their website and see if there's actually an investment policy. So everybody on the call here has one, and they kind of live by that as well too. But every pension is going to be different. One side on the regulation that we're engaging with is working with the governments to say that part of what needs to be disclosed for all pensions is their ESG, criteria, and what are they going to be doing going forward to disclose the environmental, social, and governance impact of that pension. So we're pushing hard on the regulators to actually make that a part of reporting as well.
You may have seen in the news the pressure from people of BC for the BC Investment Corporation to divest from Russia, and so this is, I believe, probably the largest pension in BC, and so they actually have started to divest from their Russian assets based on people in BC really advocating for it. So it can happen. And I know that most pensions do have at least a segment of their portfolio that's sustainable now. But we've seen with investment movements around the world. So there was like the tobacco movement to divest from tobacco. Then there was the weapons movement to divest from weapons. Now there's more of fossil fuel divestment movement. And in those past movements, we've seen that pensions are typically the last ones to divest. Usually the first ones to divest are kind of nonprofit organizations, foundations that are really passionate about the particular subject. And then comes churches and religious institutions, and then more public institutions and educational institutions. And then at the end comes pensions. So they're typically last to react because they're quite risk averse. But it is happening. A lot of them are divesting from more carbon intensive industries, but it'll take time.
My comments to add would have to do with the effectiveness that has grown. I mentioned, I think at the beginning, about growing up in the 60s and being influenced by Vietnam War and some of the assassinations and civil rights movements and things that were very unsettling. The sophistication that has developed over the last several decades among people who spend their lives as activists or in organizations whose goal has to do with some set of issues that affect overall society. And they're becoming pretty good about understanding what a company is doing and how to find out the information and use some of this ESG material and other tools. And they're getting better at it. And I'll give one example, which is, I have a friend who was in a position with a large environmental organization globally. And she found out that Facebook and a lot of the other social media firms and folks like Amazon and et cetera, the large users of power because of what the demands are of the internet. And she ran a campaign against Facebook saying, friends, she found out that Facebook was mostly using coal-fired power plants to run the tremendous amount of energy that these new social media and internet businesses require from server farms, where they concentrate the production of power. Anyhow, it turned out that Facebook was highly dependent on coal-fired energy plants. And so her campaign was, don't let friends use coal. And Facebook, within 5 days, committed to shift its energy policies and invest heavily in solar, because the attention that went deeper than the surface of what one got to experience with Facebook told a story that caused consumers and users to complain. And we're in a more transparent world where we have the tools these days to do things we didn't have 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And this is adding to the complexity of these issues. And it is complex. And it's easy to talk about ESG or talk about screening. And those of us that care the most about it tend to find out that it's not just a simple act. It's an important one. And it's part of a larger process that changes society over time, maybe decades. But we're in a period where the access to information and the access to the science and more of the issues behind what we see on the surface is creating a more informed consumer and society. And we're finding in many institutions and in many walks of life, these issues are rising. Business school students are paying attention to the same topics we're talking about tonight. And there's just a growing sophistication as the world shrinks through communication access. And I find that very inspiring and hopeful.
Fantastic. This has been really excellent. I know we're way over, Sue, but do we have time to give them 30 seconds each for one last thought? Or
Sure, that'd be fine. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
So putting you under pressure and under the gun, just 30 seconds each. Paul, final thought.
One, I'm just fortunate that my career started as a casino dealer working in wealth destruction, and I flew through retail advising at a big green bank. And then I got thrown into this responsible investment space because, oh, I could move to the Okanagan and have a job. Awesome. If I'm selling snake oil, though, I'm going to quit and at least work paid for me to be here. And that was 8 years ago. It's incredible just to be part of the change that we're seeing going on. And so I guess, yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm just grateful that like I get to spend an evening with really concerned investors. And I mean, we can go till 11:30 at night if you guys want.
Easily.
So no, I'm just grateful. So all I want to say is thank you, and thank you for everybody who showed up.
Thanks, Mike.
An honor.
Great. Yeah, I also want to thank everyone for coming out. It's been great to discuss sustainable investing, impact investing. I think the one big takeaway is to figure out your values and really stick to those, and then talk to your advisor or portfolio manager about those values and see how you can integrate them into your portfolio.
Taking that another step is we have, many of us have children, or we have young people in our lives one way or another. We have friends and family and advisors and neighbors, and we actually influence each other. And if we choose what we choose to pay attention to and to emphasize, makes a difference. And there is increasing, there are many avenues, and they're growing rapidly, of how we can express ourselves. And we can do it elegantly. We can do it in an angry, sloppy way. There are many ways to do it, but we are in an era where what we think and care about actually can have a voice and can influence things. So I encourage everyone to speak up to the people that influence your money and tell them what you want and what you believe in and what you don't want. It's really important.
Fantastic. Thank you all very, very much. This has been great. And like you said, we could easily go on for hours, but unfortunately, this is the end. Pass it back to you, Lori, to wrap things up.
Thanks, Rick, for organizing this. I'm just going to do the wrap up. And thank you, Joel, Mike, and Paul. That was just excellent. You've given us a lot of food for thought, some great information. I just want everyone to know that this was recorded, and we will be sending out an email in the next couple of days with a link to the recording. And if any of the speakers have information you would like us to include in that email, just send it to the info@ email address, Lori's address, and we'll add that to the email. And other than that, just in terms of first things first, we will be doing some Earth Day events next month. So just keep your eye out for that. You can sign up for our newsletter, or just, it will be advertised throughout the Valley, Penticton, Summerland, Naramata. And with that, I think I will just thank you all and good night. Thank you for attending. Unless, Lori, you have anything else that I've missed.
No, I was just going to tell people that there is a movie that's only available for another 2 days on Netflix. It's called There's Something in the Water, done by Elliot Page, about water issues in Nova Scotia. It was done a couple of years ago, and it's a really great documentary. I would highly recommend it. March 26th, it's over. And I also want to thank all of our panelists and Rick for organizing this, and for the First Things First team, who always seem to get this done. So thanks, everybody, and thanks everyone for coming.